Hey kids, this is Ivan. Long time no see. Today I'd like to talk to you about a game. This game is Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and I got introduced to this by being invited to play in a game by this guy, Joe the Attorney. And so we play on Sundays from 1 to 5 at Moe's in New Haven. And so if you're interested in coming playing, drop me a line and I'll give you more information. But it's a really, really cool game. And I'm really enamored with a lot of the stuff that this guy has done, and a lot of things I'm kind of like ticked off and said, man, why didn't I think of that? And so, I'm going to go through a bunch of stuff in this game, and maybe in another segment talk about what I would change, because I always mine stuff from my own homebrew game. But, overall, I think the execution on this game is really, really good. Now, essentially, at first glance, this game is basic D&D. Now, don't turn me off because it's not basic D&D. If you look under the hood, there's a lot of changes. This guy has kind of taken some ideas from various places and come up with some of his own stuff and really made a lot of really cool changes to the game that, I'm just enamored with. So I'll just go over a bunch of stuff. The first thing is the XP tables. These are the best XP tables I've ever seen, bar none. I'm not a fan of the unified XP thing because I think it, kind of gimps you in terms of being able to differentiate between classes. But what he's done is he's kept the ratios of XP needed by the various classes as they go up in levels the same the entire time. He's tightened the gaps a little bit, so like the fighter needs 2,000, the magic user only needs 2,250 instead of 2,500, the cleric needs 1,750, and then the thief needs 1,500. And that ratio continues, goes all the way up to 9th level. It kind of maxes out, you stop doubling, and then you just kind of need the same amount of XP it would take you to get from 8th to 9th, to keep on going all the way up to like level 20 or 21. Which is really cool because it just keeps things kind of like on the level and doesn't make the figures kind of wonky over time. So I really, really like those. The second thing that I'm like super enamored with is what he's done with encumbrance, because encumbrance is a great idea, but it's really hard to execute, and so a lot of times we just ignore it in any kind of game, Pathfinder or first edition or whatever, because it's tough to sit there and count all those little things. So pretty much what he did was he gave you like 6 encumbrance slots or points. And they go from like 0 points of encumbrance to 5 points of encumbrance, and at 0 or 1 point you're not really encumbered. You still have a movement rate of 12. At 1 point you have a movement rate of 9. You're somewhat encumbered. 2 you have a movement rate of 6, and etc. And that way it's easy to figure out where you are. And essentially each point has 5 items in it, and so whatever these items are, unless there's some things that are exempt, they're really light or whatever. These count as an item, and you're filling up those slots. When you fill them all up, you're at that next point of encumbrance, and then now your movement rate has suffered. Things like armor take up a certain number of these points. So leather armor will still get you, as long as you don't carry anything else, which is ridiculous. You're not really encumbered. And chainmail will fill up another point, and plate mail will fill up another point. And so it kind of dupes what they would do normally in the game. But then the other items you carry will sit there and fill those up, and you're able to figure out, well, geez, how much am I carrying, and what should my movement rate be at this point? And so it makes it super, super easy. So I really dig that. And they have things like oversized items too, like if you have a D10 weapon, that takes up an entire point, which makes sense because you're carrying this big honking halberd. This is tough. This is not easy. Just carry this thing around if you're carrying a chest. And so you may have to sit there what do I need to leave behind if we found all this nifty loot? How much of my stuff do I have to ditch because otherwise I can't move, or I can't move fast enough. So I really dig that. Now for the most part, he has elves, and he has dwarves, and he has halflings, and he's done stuff with them. And if you don't like racist class, big deal, don't do it. But I'm mostly going to talk about the 4 core classes and what he's done with those, because he's really differentiated those quite a bit. In terms of the fighter, he's made fighters stupid relevant, and one of the things he's done is in terms of attack bonus. Everybody starts out with an attack bonus of +1, and everybody's base armor class is 12. I'm really not sure why he did that and didn't just have you start out with a 0 attack bonus and keep armor class at 11, which would be analogous to 9, in the older basic D&D. But that's what he did. But fighters start out with a +2 attack bonus. Fighters are the only people that ever go up an attack bonus ever. And they finally get up to, I think it's like a +10 attack bonus at level 8, and then they stop going up in there. But that instantly makes the fighters relevant, because if you look at the old, basic tables in terms of XP and attack bonus, you want to play a cleric if you want to be a fighter, because you get the spells, and your attack bonus is just about the same as a fighter's no matter where you are. Now all of a sudden, the fighter is the man in terms of fighting. And there's also some combat options that only fighters can do, and these are things like standard stuff that you would think of in like later editions like press, where you're gonna like get a +2 to hit, but you're gonna take -4 to your armor class. Only fighters can do that. Only fighters can fight defensively, and they get a +2 to their armor class, but -4 to hit because they know combat. And in terms of just being able to parry a blow, like when a fighter does it, he gets a +4 to his armor class. Everybody else only gets a +2 to their armor class because they're just not as good as doing that sort of thing. So that's nifty. In terms of thief skills, he's done something that's really, really cool and really, really simple. Instead of using percentage points or like D20 stuff or whatever, pretty much everybody starts out with a 1 in 6 chance to do everything. And there's like 10 named skills, and there's 2 extra skills you can fill in with whatever you'd like as a DM. And some of these things are standard, what you would think of as thief skills, like climbing and searching and sleight of hand, sneak attack and stealth, and tinkering, which would be kind of like opening locks and removing traps and all that kind of stuff. And then he's got a couple ones that are a little odd at first glance, thing called architecture, which is almost kind of like dungeoneering, or like what dwarves would be able to do in the older games, where they're able to determine has there been unusual stonework, what's going on at this castle, is there some kind of weird construction or anything like that, what are we going up or down, all that kind of stuff. And something called Bushcraft, which is kind of like Ranger-esque, and it's a little bit survival. Can you find food in the woods? What's your chances? What are your chances to track somebody? All that kind of stuff. And he's got a couple other ones which are a little odd. Opening doors. I don't think you should be able to put extra slots in that thing. But everybody starts out with a 1 in 6 chance to open the big, heavy, stuck, iconic dungeon doors. And one called Languages, which is modified by your intelligence. Whereas the doors will be modified by strength. And this is kind of like, if you show up and you find, you encounter Elven for the first time. Instead of saying, I know Elven, well, no, you got to roll a die and see if you do know Elven. And you have a 1 in 6, base chance, and you can modify that with your intelligence kind of thing. Now, what specialists or thieves are able to do at this point is they start out at first level with 4 extra points or D6 pips, and they can assign these to wherever they'd like. And that increases their percentage, or their chance in 6. So now you have a 2 in 6 chance, say in stealth, if you put one there. If you put 1 in sneak attack, all of a sudden now that gives you a damage multiplier. So now if you have a 2 in 6 on sneak attack, now you do double damage, and it also gives you like +2 the first time you do that to your attack. So it gives you that +4 backstab and all that kind of thing. And then every other level, the specialist or thief gets 2 more pips to assign. So it's a little bit like 2nd edition, where you get to kind of like custom make your thief, so to speak, and make him like what you want him to be. And nobody else gets to do that. And certain races actually have extra stuff, like dwarves have extra in architecture, so it makes them more like dwarves, and elves have extra in search, etc. And as they go up in levels, they automatically just get better and better at that sort of thing. So it kind of dupes the old school feel a little bit, but it makes thief skills really, really easy to implement in the game. They use the basic, strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma with the basic ability score modifiers. So 13 to 15 is +1, 16 to 17 is +2, 18 is +3. But there are some interesting things, like strength. It'll affect your melee to hit, but not your damage, which is kind of interesting. But it's more of like an old school D&D kind of idea. But they affect the basic things you would think of, like hit points and armor class and that sort of thing. Some of your saving throws. He's got the basic 5 saving throws, which are pretty similar in progression to what you would find in basic D&D. He's done some pretty interesting things with magic. Turning undead is a spell. It is not an automatic ability the cleric has. You have to burn a first level spell to try to turn undead. And he's got a little table. It's based on hit dice, not like what kind of monster they are, just how powerful they are. Cure light wounds can also kind of do cure disease if you want to, or remove paralysis. You don't have to have all these different spells. However, you have to make a save versus magic in order for this thing to work. Not so much for the healing, but for the other things like removing paralysis or disease and that sort of stuff, which is kind of nifty. Magic Missile is the only spell that does damage. There's no fireballs or lightning bolts. I mean, there is something like Cloud Kill, but Magic Missile does D4 per level, so it goes up a lot faster than it normally would in other versions of D&D, so to speak. And you can split it between different people if you want to shoot different missiles at different people. However, now they get a saving throw where they wouldn't normally get it, and they can get half damage if they make the saving throw. But that's pretty neat. Things like Identify. You have to build a laboratory. and actually sit there and spend money, and then you can identify the item. You're not going to lose constitution and all that stuff, but it's going to cost money, and then identifying the item is going to take a certain amount of money out of your lab that you've got to put back into it. You can also use this laboratory to write scrolls. Anybody, even your first level, you can write a scroll, and it's just going to cost you a certain amount of time and money, and part of it's based on the spell level, and part of it's based on a die roll, and your intelligence or your wisdom will modify like how fast that happens. So that's really kind of cool that you can start doing that stuff like right away in the game, and you don't have to wait so long. You have to be like 7th level or something. So that's really, really cool, and I could go on and on about the various changes he'd made to Magic, but those are some of the ones, the more salient ones. He's got some pretty interesting spells in there too, but it's really cool. The money system is based on the silver piece, not the gold piece. So like in a lot of things, these will cost silver pieces to make these scrolls and everything, which is cool because when you have everything on the gold standard, it just the economy is kind of unrealistic. Now silver pieces also equal XP, just like gold pieces used to. So this loot is still kind of your major way of like actually getting XP, the safest. You can still get XP for wasting monsters. And it's more generous than it is in something like basic D&D or first edition. Not quite so generous as it is in like 3rd edition or Pathfinder or whatever, but you can certainly get XP for killing monsters. And so that's pretty decent too. I'm trying to think of anything else really cool. Oh, there's a lot of different weapons effects that are really kind of neat. Things like crossbows. Now heavy crossbow will take 3 rounds. You can only fire it every 3 rounds because it takes a while to load. And the rounds are only like 6 seconds long or 10 seconds long. And light crossbow will take 2 rounds to actually fully do this. However, the longbows in this game are not like Robin Hood style longbows. They're not going to penetrate armor the way Robin Hood would. So these crossbows are the heavy guns, and so a light crossbow will ignore like 2 points of armor, and the heavy crossbow will ignore 4. So it takes a while to reload these things, but these things are pretty badass. Also, when you're using missile weapons, you can aim. And so you take an entire round to do nothing but aim, and then you get a +4 on the next round when you finally fire this thing off to actually hit. So that kind of makes missile weapons a lot more relevant, because usually we kind of like just say, just close and let's fight. Now it makes them a little bit more relevant, a little more interesting. Things like oil. I really like what he's done with this. He's made oil more and less deadly. Oil only does D4 damage. However, if you roll a 4, you get to roll D4 again. If you roll, so the person burns a little more. If you roll another 4, the person is on fire, and now they're taking 2d6 damage every single round until somebody figures out how to put them out. That's pretty freaking cool. He also uses something like the modification I made in my own game to the old CMD mechanic, where if you're wrestling, you're doing anything like that, pretty much you use your attack bonus and your strength bonus, and you roll d20s, and it's any ties are taken care of by your dexterity modifier. So it's really close to what I did. It's really close to that kind of mechanic they use in Pathfinder. And just get rid of all these stupid grappling rolls and just do a little d20 roll and add the relevant modifiers. I think that's really cool. In terms of death, if you get knocked down to -3, you are dying. Nothing is going to help you, and you're going to bleed to death in d10 rounds, and that's it. If you get knocked down to -4, you're dead. In terms of healing, if you still have half your hit points or better, if you rest a night, you're going to get 1 hit point back. If you rest an entire day, you're going to get 3 hit points back. However, if you're under half hit points, now you're really kind of gimping at this point. You've taken some real hit points of damage. So all of a sudden now, like a full day of rest is going to give you just 1 hit point, and a night's rest isn't going to give you anything. So the game is kind of deadly. Like in our game, to be honest with you, like we have 5 players. So far, 4 of us are on our second characters, and each one of us has a hireling retainer kind of guy, and 2 of those guys have already been wasted, and so it's pretty cool. But to be honest with you, there's a ton of great changes in this game that make it more playable and easier to play, and it differentiates the classes for sure. There's definitely nobody else is like going up in these thief skills, but the thief skills are a lot easier to implement. The fighter is instantly much more relevant because he's the guy with all the combat skills, period. And then the cleric and the magic user, they have their various spells that they can cast, and they also have the ability to make the scrolls and all that kind of stuff, and turning undead is this whole spell thing now. But it really helps the classes out, and in terms of differentiating them. And the demi-human classes have some other interesting differentiating stuff too, in terms of like hit dice and some of these like thieves type abilities they just are good at and they get better at because they're elves or dwarves or whatever. So it's a good game, and I recommend you check it out. I'm going to do another installment and talk about some of the changes I'd make to it, or I'd make to the mechanics when I put them in my own game. So that's it.